The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across 200 corporate executives as Charlotte Henderson pointed her manicured finger directly at me. "Table 4 is dirty, bus girl." Her voice sliced through the elegant dinner conversation like broken glass. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. The shame burned my cheeks as I reached for my cleaning cloth, but then something incredible happened. I pulled out a legal document instead. "Actually, Charlotte," I said calmly, "you need to leave. This is an eviction notice. I bought this venue and I reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." 6 months earlier, I never imagined I would own one of the most prestigious event venues in Connecticut. My name is Destiny, and at 28, I had built a solid career as a financial advisor, specializing in commercial real estate investments. My office overlooked the Hartford Business District, where I helped clients navigate complex property acquisitions and portfolio management. Everything changed the day my grandmother Margaret passed away. She left me $2 million plus a diversified investment portfolio that she had carefully cultivated over decades. Margaret always told me that money was a tool for creating positive change, not just personal comfort. Her words echoed in my mind as I studied various commercial property listings, searching for the right investment opportunity. The Grandview estate caught my attention immediately. This historic venue had hosted Connecticut's most elegant weddings, corporate events, and social gatherings for 3 generations. The photographs showed sweeping gardens, ballrooms with hand-painted ceilings, and architecture that blended colonial charm with modern amenities. But the listing seemed oddly underpriced for such a premium property. My research revealed that the estate was owned by Thomas Blackwood, an 82-year-old gentleman whose family had operated the venue since 1953. Recent financial reports showed troubling patterns. Revenue had declined sharply over the past 18 months, despite the venue maintaining a strong reputation in the community. I arranged a meeting with Thomas at the estate. He greeted me at the main entrance, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes that held deep sadness. We walked through the property together as he shared stories of the thousands of celebrations that had taken place within these walls. "My late wife Eleanor and I hosted our own wedding reception here in 1983, Thomas said, his voice growing wistful. "She designed the rose garden herself. Every spring when those flowers bloom, I still hear her laughter echoing across the grounds." The estate was magnificent, but I noticed signs of deferred maintenance. Some of the exterior paint was peeling, and several of the garden areas needed attention. When I asked about the financial challenges, Thomas's expression darkened. "My granddaughter Charlotte handles most of the business operations now," he explained reluctantly. "She married into the Henderson family. You might know them from Henderson Industries, the tech company. Charlotte insisted she could modernize our operations and increase profitability." As we continued the tour, Thomas's phone buzzed repeatedly with text messages. Each notification made him more agitated. Finally, he glanced at the screen and sighed heavily. "She needs me to transfer another $15,000 to cover vendor payments for this weekend's wedding," he said. "This is the 3rd emergency payment request this month. I've already remortgaged my house twice to keep the business afloat." My financial advisor instincts immediately activated. Emergency payment requests were classic red flags in business operations. Legitimate businesses maintained adequate cash flow reserves and established vendor payment schedules. The pattern Thomas described suggested either gross mismanagement or something more sinister. "Thomas, would you mind if I reviewed some of the recent financial statements?" I asked gently. "Maybe I can help identify areas where we could improve cash flow management." His relief was palpable. "Would you really do that?" Charlotte gets so frustrated when I ask questions about the numbers. She says I don't understand modern business practices. We spent the rest of the afternoon going through 3 years of financial records. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Revenue from events remained consistent, but expenses had skyrocketed far beyond reasonable operational costs. Vendor payments showed irregular patterns, with some suppliers being paid multiple times for the same invoices, while others went months without compensation. Most alarming were the cash transfers. Large sums regularly moved from the estate's operating accounts to personal accounts registered under Charlotte's name. The amounts totaled over $400,000 in the past year alone. "Thomas," I said carefully, "have you noticed any unusual patterns in client payments or vendor relationships lately?" He looked confused. "Charlotte handles all of that. She told me that modern payment processing requires more complex procedures. I trust her judgment. She's family." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the estate grounds, Thomas shared more troubling details. Charlotte had recently suggested that he should consider selling the property and retiring. She claimed the hospitality industry was becoming too competitive for small family businesses to survive. "She's probably right," Thomas admitted. "Maybe I'm too old to keep fighting these financial battles. Charlotte has her own life to worry about. She shouldn't have to keep bailing out her grandfather's struggling business." But something in his voice suggested he didn't really believe his own words. The estate wasn't just a business to Thomas. It represented 3 generations of family legacy and thousands of cherished memories. As I prepared to leave, Thomas walked me to my car. "Destiny! I hope you don't think less of me for sharing all these problems with a stranger. Charlotte would be mortified if she knew I discussed our private family matters with an outsider." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Thomas, you're not sharing with a stranger. You're consulting with a financial professional who genuinely cares about preserving family legacies. Would you allow me to conduct a more thorough analysis of the estate's finances? I might be able to suggest strategies for stabilizing operations." His eyes brightened with the first genuine hope I had seen all afternoon. "You would really help us." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Thomas and the estate. Something was very wrong with the financial picture Charlotte had painted. A successful tech industry heiress shouldn't need to request emergency funding transfers from her elderly grandfather on a weekly basis. The pattern suggested either serious gambling debts, substance abuse problems, or deliberate embezzlement. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my attorney and asked her to recommend a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. If Charlotte was stealing from her own grandfather, I was going to expose her before she destroyed the family legacy Thomas had spent his lifetime building. 5 months before that fateful gala, I sat across from Susan Ramirez in her downtown office. Susan had spent 15 years as a forensic accountant before transitioning into private investigation work. Her specialty was uncovering financial fraud in family businesses, exactly the expertise I needed. "Based on the documents you've provided, this appears to be a classic case of elder financial abuse," Susan said, spreading the estate records across her desk. "The irregular cash transfers, emergency payment requests, and vendor discrepancies all point to systematic embezzlement." Susan's investigation began immediately. She traced the estate's vendor relationships and discovered a disturbing pattern. Charlotte had been collecting full payments from clients for upcoming events, then using those deposits for personal expenses. When vendor bills came due, she would demand emergency transfers from Thomas to cover the shortfalls. "She's essentially running a shell game," Susan explained during our second meeting. "Client money goes into her personal accounts, then she replaces it with Thomas's emergency funds just before vendors need to be paid. It's a form of check kiting that can continue indefinitely as long as new clients keep providing deposits." The investigation revealed 3 families whose special occasions had been ruined by Charlotte's financial manipulations. The Martinez family had planned their daughter Sophia's quinceañera celebration for over a year. They had paid the estate $12,000 in deposits and spent months coordinating with vendors for flowers photography and catering. 2 days before the celebration, Charlotte called Mrs. Martinez with devastating news. "Due to unexpected plumbing problems, we need to postpone your daughter's party indefinitely. Our insurance company requires extensive water damage repairs before we can host events safely." Mrs. Martinez was heartbroken. Sophia had invited 60 family members from across the country. Some of her cousins had already flown in from Puerto Rico. We begged Charlotte to find an alternative solution, but she claimed her hands were tied by insurance regulations. The family never received their deposit refund. Charlotte claimed the insurance company was investigating potential fraud claims and all payments were frozen pending resolution. Mrs. Martinez showed me the letters Charlotte had sent filled with legal terminology and insurance company letterhead that looked official but contained no actual insurance company contact information. The Johnson family experienced similar devastation during their 40th wedding anniversary celebration. They had paid the estate $18,000 for a party honoring 4 decades of marriage. Their adult children had traveled from California and Texas to attend the celebration. On the morning of their anniversary party, vendors began arriving at the estate to set up decorations and prepare the reception dinner. But something was terribly wrong. The florist hadn't been paid and refused to deliver arrangements. The catering company discovered their checks had bounced and threatened to leave with all the food. Charlotte appeared frazzled and kept making phone calls about banking errors. Mr. Johnson told me, "She assured us everything would be resolved within hours, but by afternoon most of the vendors had packed up and left. Our anniversary party turned into a humiliating disaster in front of our children and grandchildren. Like the Martinez family, the Johnsons never received their deposit refund." Charlotte blamed the vendor problems on a cyber attack that had compromised the estate's banking systems. She provided official-looking documentation about federal investigations and regulatory freezes that prevented any refunds until authorities completed their inquiry. Susan's investigation revealed that no insurance claims had been filed and no cyber attack had occurred. Charlotte had simply stolen the deposit money and used elaborate lies to avoid returning it to the devastated families. The third case involved the Peterson wedding, which had been planned for 8 months. The young couple had saved for 3 years to afford their dream wedding at the prestigious estate. They paid $25,000 in deposits and worked closely with Charlotte to coordinate every detail. 1 week before the wedding, Charlotte called with shocking news. The estate had been cited by health inspectors for serious violations and was temporarily prohibited from hosting food service events. The wedding would need to be moved to a different venue immediately. Charlotte offered to help us find an alternative location, but with 1 week's notice, everything was either booked or far beyond our budget, the bride told me through tears. We ended up having a small ceremony in my parents' backyard instead of the elegant celebration we had planned for years. The health inspection story was completely fabricated. Susan contacted the county health department and confirmed that no inspections had been conducted at the estate and no violations had been issued. Charlotte had invented the entire scenario to cover her theft of the wedding deposits. As Susan compiled evidence of these crimes, she discovered Charlotte's personal banking records through legal subpoenas. The stolen deposit money had been used for luxury shopping sprees, expensive vacations, and payments to exclusive gambling establishments in Atlantic City. "She's not just stealing from her grandfather," Susan reported. "She's systematically defrauding every client who trusts the estate with their most important celebrations. This isn't financial mismanagement. This is deliberate, calculated theft." The most shocking discovery came when Susan examined the estate's property records. Charlotte had been forging Thomas's signature on legal documents, preparing to sell the estate from under him and claim the proceeds as an inheritance advance. She had already contacted several commercial real estate developers and received offers exceeding $3 million. She's planning to complete the sale within the next 60 days, Susan warned me. Once those papers are filed, Thomas could lose everything his family built over 3 generations. The buyers she's contacted are planning to demolish the historic buildings and develop luxury condominiums. I felt sick imagining Thomas's reaction when he discovered his granddaughter's ultimate betrayal. She wasn't just stealing money, she was planning to destroy the family legacy and leave him homeless and penniless in his 80s. Susan, we need to stop her before she can complete this sale, I said urgently. What legal options do we have? We need to file for emergency injunctions to freeze all property transactions and bank accounts, she replied. But we'll need Thomas's cooperation as the legal property owner. You'll have to convince him to take action against his own granddaughter. That evening, I drove to Thomas's modest apartment near the estate. He had moved there after remortgaging his house to cover Charlotte's supposed business emergencies. When I showed him the evidence Susan had compiled, his face aged 10 years in 10 minutes. She told me she was protecting the family business, he whispered, staring at bank records showing his granddaughter's theft. She said modern business required more aggressive financial strategies. I trusted her completely. Thomas, she's planning to sell the estate and keep all the money for herself, I explained gently. If we don't take legal action immediately, you'll lose everything within weeks. He sat in stunned silence for several minutes, processing the scope of Charlotte's betrayal. Finally, he looked at me with determination I hadn't seen before. What do we need to do to stop her? 4 months before the gala, I introduced Thomas to Patricia Williams, an attorney specializing in elder financial abuse cases. Patricia's office walls displayed dozens of awards for her advocacy work protecting vulnerable seniors from family exploitation. Thomas, what Charlotte has done constitutes several serious felonies, Patricia explained during our initial consultation. Elder financial abuse, embezzlement, fraud, and forgery are all prosecutable crimes that carry significant prison sentences. Patricia outlined our legal strategy in detail. First, we would file emergency motions to freeze all estate bank accounts and prevent any property transactions. Second, we would seek restraining orders prohibiting Charlotte from accessing estate premises or financial records. Third, we would file criminal complaints with the state attorney's office to begin prosecution proceedings. This process will be emotionally difficult, Patricia warned Thomas. Charlotte will likely hire expensive lawyers and may attempt to turn other family members against you. Are you prepared for that level of conflict? Thomas's voice was steady but sad. Patricia, I've lost my granddaughter already. She stopped being the child I raised the moment she decided to steal from innocent families and destroy our legacy. I won't let her hurt anyone else. We organized a meeting with all of Charlotte's victims to coordinate our legal strategy. The Martinez, Johnson, and Peterson families gathered in Patricia's conference room to share their experiences and plan their response to Charlotte's crimes. We want our money back, obviously, Mrs. Martinez said. But more importantly, we want to make sure she can't do this to other families. Sophia's quinceañera was supposed to be the celebration of her transition to adulthood. Instead, it became a lesson about how cruel people can be. Mr. Johnson nodded in agreement. Our anniversary party was meant to show our children and grandchildren what a lasting marriage looks like. Charlotte turned it into a source of embarrassment and disappointment that still hurts months later. The Peterson couple was the most emotional. We spent 3 years saving for our dream wedding, the bride said through tears. Charlotte didn't just steal our money. She stole the beginning of our marriage and replaced it with stress and heartbreak. Patricia took detailed statements from each family and compiled documentation of their financial losses. The total amount Charlotte had stolen exceeded $150,000, not including the emotional damages she had caused. I want to make sure every family receives full restitution, I told the group. If we can stop Charlotte's crimes and recover the estate, I'm prepared to personally guarantee that everyone gets their money back. Thomas was deeply moved by my commitment. Destiny, Why are you willing to do so much for people you barely know? Because this is what my grandmother Margaret would have wanted, I replied. She always taught me that wealth should be used to protect innocent people and preserve things that matter to communities. This estate represents decades of family celebrations and community memories. Charlotte has no right to destroy that for her personal greed. Over the following weeks, we developed a comprehensive strategy to expose Charlotte's crimes while protecting the estate's future. Patricia filed all the necessary legal motions to freeze Charlotte's access to estate resources. Susan continued investigating to identify any additional victims or hidden assets. Meanwhile, I worked with Thomas to understand the estate's true financial position and potential value. Despite Charlotte's theft and mismanagement, the property itself remained incredibly valuable. The historic buildings were structurally sound, and the grounds maintained their natural beauty. With proper management and sufficient capital investment, the estate could return to profitability within 2 years. Thomas, I'd like to make you a formal offer to purchase the estate, I proposed during one of our planning meetings. I'll pay fair market value based on professional appraisals, which will give you enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. I'll also commit to preserving the estate's character and continuing its tradition of hosting family celebrations. His eyes filled with tears. You would really do that, even after seeing all the problems Charlotte has created. Especially because of the problems she's created, I answered. This place deserves better than being demolished for condominiums. The families who trusted the estate with their most important moments deserve justice. And you deserve to see your family's legacy honored rather than destroyed. We spent hours discussing my vision for the estate's future. I plan to invest in necessary maintenance and upgrades while preserving the property's historic charm. I wanted to create a victim restitution fund to compensate all the families Charlotte had defrauded. Most importantly, I intended to establish the estate as a model for ethical business practices in the hospitality industry. I want to create an elder abuse prevention foundation using a portion of the estate's profits, I explained to Thomas. We'll provide educational resources to help other families recognize and prevent the kind of exploitation Charlotte perpetrated. Your experience could help protect countless other seniors from similar betrayal. Thomas was overwhelmed by the scope of my plans. Destiny? I never imagined that something positive could emerge from this nightmare. You're not just saving the estate. You're transforming Charlotte's crimes into a force for protecting other families. As our legal and financial preparations intensified, Charlotte remained completely unaware of our investigation. She continued operating the estate as if nothing had changed, collecting deposits from new clients and making increasingly desperate requests for emergency funding from Thomas. She's becoming more erratic, Thomas reported. Yesterday, she called 3 times demanding money for supposed equipment repairs. When I asked to see invoices from the repair companies, she became extremely angry and accused me of not trusting her business judgment. Patricia warned us that Charlotte might become dangerous once she discovered our investigation. Family members who commit financial abuse often escalate to other forms of violence when their crimes are exposed. We need to be prepared for her to react unpredictably. That warning proved prophetic sooner than we expected. 2 weeks later, Susan called with urgent news that would forever change the trajectory of our case. Destiny, you need to get to the estate immediately, Susan said. Charlotte just tried to burn the place down. 2 months before the gala, I received Susan's emergency call at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I threw on clothes and raced to the estate, arriving just as fire trucks were leaving the scene. The acrid smell of smoke hung heavy in the air, and emergency floodlights illuminated the estate's main building. Thomas stood near the entrance wrapped in a blanket and looking shaken but unharmed. A police detective was taking his statement while paramedics checked him for smoke inhalation. What happened? I asked, rushing to Thomas's side. Charlotte came here around 10 o'clock. he explained, his voice trembling. She claimed she needed to retrieve some business documents from the office. I didn't think anything suspicious about it until I smelled gasoline fumes coming from the building. The fire chief approached us with grim news. Sir, someone deliberately poured accelerant throughout the main office and reception areas. If you hadn't called when you did, this entire building would have been destroyed within minutes. Charlotte had been caught in the act by both Thomas and the arriving firefighters. Security cameras recorded her pouring gasoline around the estate's business office and attempting to ignite it with matches. When Thomas confronted her, she initially claimed she was cleaning equipment with gasoline and had accidentally spilled some, but the security footage told a different story. Charlotte had deliberately saturated office furniture, filing cabinets, and computer equipment with gasoline. She had poured accelerant along the hallways leading to the main reception areas. This wasn't an accident or a cleaning mishap. This was attempted arson designed to destroy all evidence of her financial crimes. She kept screaming about someone trying to ruin her life, Thomas told the detective. When the firefighters arrived, she accused me of setting her up and claimed I was trying to frame her for something she didn't do. She seemed genuinely confused about why anyone would suspect her of wrongdoing. Detective Rodriguez, who was handling the arson investigation, had extensive experience with financial crime cases. This pattern is actually quite common, he explained to me privately. When embezzlers realize they're about to be exposed, they often attempt to destroy evidence rather than face prosecution. Insurance fraud becomes their exit strategy. Charlotte was arrested at the scene and charged with attempted arson, insurance fraud, and destruction of evidence. The judge denied her bail application after prosecutors argued she posed both a flight risk and a danger to witnesses in the financial abuse case. Your Honor, the defendant has access to significant financial resources through her marriage and has already demonstrated willingness to destroy evidence and endanger others, the prosecutor argued. She attempted to burn down a historic building while her elderly grandfather was inside. We cannot guarantee public safety if she's released pending trial. Charlotte's expensive legal team argued that the arson was a desperate attempt to hide evidence of business mistakes, not malicious intent to harm anyone. They portrayed her as a confused young woman overwhelmed by family business responsibilities she wasn't qualified to handle. But Patricia had prepared for this defense strategy. She presented evidence showing Charlotte's systematic theft and deception over 18 months, demonstrating clear criminal intent rather than simple mismanagement. Your Honor, this defendant has stolen over $200,000 from elderly family members and innocent clients, Patricia argued. She forged legal documents attempting to sell property that doesn't belong to her. The arson was part of a calculated plan to destroy evidence and claim insurance money to cover her theft. This is not confusion or incompetence. This is organized criminal activity. Judge Martinez reviewed the evidence carefully before denying bail. The defendant's actions demonstrate escalating criminal behavior that poses significant risk to witnesses and the community. She will remain in custody pending trial on all charges. Charlotte's arrest made front-page news in the local papers. Tech heiress arrested for arson and elder abuse, read the headline in the Hartford Courant. The story detailed her theft from the estate and her grandfather, as well as the victimized families who had trusted her with their celebrations. The media attention brought forward additional victims we hadn't discovered during our investigation. 3 more families contacted Patricia's office to report similar experiences with Charlotte and the estate. The pattern was identical: large deposits, collected events canceled at the last minute due to fabricated emergencies, and refunds never provided. She stole from at least 8 families that we know of, Patricia reported during our team meeting. The total amount exceeds $300,000. Some of these families borrowed money or used their life savings to pay for celebrations that never happened. With Charlotte in jail and all estate transactions frozen by court order, I was able to finalize the purchase agreement with Thomas. Professional appraisers valued the property at $2.8 million, providing Thomas with enough money to live comfortably while ensuring I paid fair market value. "I never imagined I would sell the estate under these circumstances," Thomas said as we signed the final paperwork. "But knowing it will be preserved and used to help other families gives me peace about this decision." The estate's insurance company initially resisted paying for the fire damage, claiming the policy didn't cover arson committed by family members with access to the property. But Patricia successfully argued that Charlotte's crimes voided any family member exemptions in the policy. The defendant was engaged in systematic criminal activity that her grandfather was unaware of, Patricia argued to the insurance adjusters. Thomas Blackwood was actually Charlotte's victim, not her accomplice. The estate deserves full coverage for damages caused by her criminal actions. The insurance settlement covered all fire damage repairs, plus additional compensation for business interruption during the restoration period. This allowed me to hire contractors immediately to restore the estate to its original condition, while adding modern safety and security systems. As renovation work progressed, I hired several new employees to replace staff members Charlotte had wrongfully terminated. She had fired the estate's longtime event coordinator after the woman questioned discrepancies in client contracts. She had also terminated the groundskeeper who had maintained the gardens for 15 years after he asked about unpaid invoices from landscaping suppliers. "Charlotte told us budget cuts required downsizing," explained Maria Santos, the former event coordinator, who eagerly returned to work. "But she was driving a new BMW and wearing designer clothes that cost more than my annual salary. Something didn't add up about her claims of financial problems." With my team in place, we began planning the estate's grand reopening. I wanted the first major event to be something special that would demonstrate our commitment to ethical practices and exceptional service. The opportunity came when Henderson Industries contacted us about hosting their annual corporate gala. The irony was perfect. Charlotte's husband's company wanted to hold their most important social event of the year at the very venue where Charlotte had committed her crimes. They had no idea about the connection between Charlotte's arrest and the estate's new ownership. "We've heard wonderful things about the estate's restoration under new management," the Henderson Industries event planner said during our initial meeting. "Our CEO specifically requested this venue for our corporate dinner. He wants to showcase the company's commitment to supporting local historic properties." I accepted the contract with a sense of poetic justice brewing in my mind. If Charlotte somehow managed to escape from jail custody as dangerous criminals sometimes did, she would discover her ultimate humiliation at the very event meant to celebrate her husband's company. Little did I know that my instincts about Charlotte's desperation would prove terrifyingly accurate. 1 month before the gala, Charlotte's trial began in Hartford Superior Court. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case documenting her systematic theft, fraud, and attempted arson. Media coverage was extensive, with local news stations providing daily updates on the proceedings. Charlotte's defense team attempted to portray her as a victim of unrealistic family expectations and poor financial advice. They argued that her grandfather had pressured her to manage a business she wasn't qualified to operate, leading to mistakes that spiraled out of control. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Charlotte Henderson is not a criminal mastermind," her attorney argued during opening statements. "She's a young woman who tried to help her family's struggling business and made increasingly desperate decisions when those efforts failed. Her actions were misguided, but they came from a desire to save the family legacy, not destroy it." But the prosecution's evidence was devastating. Patricia testified about the systematic nature of Charlotte's crimes and the extensive harm caused to innocent families. Susan presented detailed financial analysis, showing how Charlotte had deliberately moved money from business accounts to personal accounts for luxury spending. The victimized families provided emotional testimony about how Charlotte's crimes had affected their lives. Mrs. Martinez described the heartbreak of watching her daughter Sophia cry as extended family members left town without celebrating her quinceañera. "Charlotte didn't just steal our money," Mrs. Martinez testified. "She stole a once-in-a-lifetime moment from our daughter. Sophia will never get another opportunity to have a traditional quinceañera celebration with her whole family together." Mr. Johnson's testimony was equally powerful. "My wife and I waited 40 years to celebrate our anniversary with all our children and grandchildren. Charlotte turned what should have been our proudest moment into public humiliation. Our family still feels the pain of that disappointment." The Peterson couple's testimony brought several jurors to tears. "We saved for 3 years to afford our dream wedding," the bride testified. "Charlotte's theft forced us to have a backyard ceremony instead of the elegant celebration we had planned since we got engaged. Every time we look at our wedding photos, we're reminded of what she took from us." Thomas's testimony was the most compelling. He described discovering that his granddaughter had been systematically stealing from him while he remortgaged his house to cover her supposed business emergencies. "I trusted Charlotte completely," Thomas testified. "She was my granddaughter. I raised her after her parents died in a car accident. I would have given her anything she needed if she had just asked honestly. Instead, she chose to steal from me and lie about emergencies that never existed." Charlotte's ex-husband provided damaging testimony about her gambling addiction and escalating debts. He revealed that she had lost over $100,000 at Atlantic City casinos in the 6 months before her arrest. "Charlotte became obsessed with high-stakes poker games," he testified. "She convinced herself she could win back all the money she had lost, but her debts just kept growing. When I tried to intervene, she accused me of trying to control her and threatened divorce if I didn't give her access to more money." The prosecution played security footage from the estate showing Charlotte pouring gasoline throughout the building and attempting to light matches near the accelerant. The images were shocking, clearly showing deliberate arson rather than any kind of accident. "The defendant's actions that night demonstrate the calculated nature of her criminal activity," prosecutor Jennifer Walsh argued. "When she realized her theft was about to be exposed, she attempted to destroy all evidence by burning down a historic building while her elderly grandfather was inside. This was not the behavior of someone who made innocent mistakes. This was the behavior of someone who knew exactly what she had done and was willing to commit additional crimes to avoid accountability." Charlotte's testimony in her own defense was disastrous. Under cross-examination, she became defensive and contradictory, unable to explain the discrepancies between her claims of business problems and her personal spending records. "Ms. Henderson, you testified that the estate was struggling financially," Prosecutor Walsh said, "yet bank records show you spent $12,000 on a single shopping trip to New York City during the same week you told your grandfather the business needed emergency funding. How do you explain that contradiction?" Charlotte's response was rambling and unconvincing. "The shopping trip was necessary for maintaining professional appearances at business meetings. Image is important in the hospitality industry. I was trying to attract higher quality clients to improve the estate's profitability." "Ms. Henderson, the shopping receipts show purchases of personal jewelry and designer handbags, not professional attire. How do luxury personal items help the estate attract business clients?" Charlotte couldn't provide a coherent answer. Her testimony continued for 3 hours, with each question revealing more lies and inconsistencies in her defense. After 5 days of trial, the jury deliberated for only 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges: elder financial abuse, embezzlement fraud, forgery, attempted arson, and insurance fraud. The speed of their decision reflected how overwhelming the evidence had been. Judge Martinez scheduled sentencing for the following week. "Ms. Henderson, you have been convicted of serious felonies that caused extensive harm to multiple victims, including your own grandfather who trusted you completely. The court will consider the scope of your crimes and their impact on innocent families when determining an appropriate sentence. At the sentencing hearing, each victim family was allowed to provide impact statements describing how Charlotte's crimes had affected their lives. Their testimony was heartbreaking, but also showed remarkable resilience and forgiveness. We hope Charlotte uses her time in prison to understand the pain she has caused and find a way to make meaningful amends, Mrs. Martinez said. Our daughter Sophia has learned to find joy in smaller celebrations with family, but she still asks why someone would steal her special day. Judge Martinez imposed a sentence of 5 years in prison, plus full restitution to all victims. Charlotte would also be required to perform 500 hours of community service working with elder abuse prevention organizations after her release. Ms. Henderson, you betrayed the trust of your grandfather, violated the faith of innocent families, and attempted to destroy evidence through arson, Judge Martinez said. Your crimes were systematic, deliberate, and caused extensive harm to vulnerable people who trusted you. This sentence reflects the seriousness of your actions and the need to protect other potential victims. Charlotte's mother attended the sentencing hearing and approached Thomas afterward with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry about what my daughter did to you, she said. I had no idea about any of this until I saw the news coverage. Thank you for not giving up on trying to get justice for all the families she hurt. Thomas embraced her gently. Your daughter made her own choices. You're not responsible for what she decided to do. I hope prison gives her time to reflect on how her actions affected others and find a way to rebuild her life when she's released. The restitution order required Charlotte to pay over $350,000 to her victims, including compensation for emotional damages beyond the stolen deposits. Since she had spent most of the stolen money on gambling and luxury purchases, the court ordered seizure of all her remaining assets to fund victim compensation. With Charlotte convicted and imprisoned, I felt a sense of justice and closure that allowed me to focus completely on the estate's future. The renovations were nearly complete, and our staff was excited about hosting the Henderson Industries Gala as our grand reopening event. But 3 days before the gala, I received a phone call that would test everything we had built over the past months. The week before Henderson Industries corporate gala, Detective Rodriguez called with disturbing news about Charlotte's associates from the Atlantic City gambling scene. Destiny, we've intercepted communications suggesting some of Charlotte's criminal contacts are planning to disrupt your first major event. Detective Rodriguez explained. Charlotte apparently borrowed money from some dangerous people to fund her gambling, and they're angry about not being repoed. They see the gala as an opportunity to cause problems for the estate and potentially extort money from you as the new owner. The FBI became involved, immediately recognizing that organized crime figures were planning to interfere with a legitimate business operation. Agent Sarah Chen specialized in gambling-related criminal enterprises and understood the mentality of Charlotte's associates. These individuals typically operate through intimidation and property damage, Agent Chen explained during our security briefing. They'll likely attempt to contaminate food service damage equipment or create disturbances that force cancellation of the event. Their goal is to destroy your reputation so they can demand protection payments to prevent future incidents. We developed a comprehensive security plan that would protect the gala while gathering evidence against Charlotte's criminal associates. I would work undercover as part of the catering staff, allowing me to monitor the event closely while coordinating with law enforcement officers positioned throughout the venue. Your role will be to maintain normal operations while alerting us to any suspicious activity, Agent Chen instructed. We'll have agents posing as guest vendors and security personnel. The criminals won't realize they're walking into a federal operation. The catering company I hired was briefed on the security situation and agreed to cooperate fully with law enforcement. They provided authentic uniforms and credentials that would allow me to move freely throughout the event without drawing suspicion. During the final week of preparation, Charlotte's associates made several attempts to sabotage the event setup. They tried to bribe vendors to deliver contaminated food supplies, but Agent Chen's team intercepted the communications and replaced the compromised items with safe alternatives. We caught them attempting to introduce shellfish allergens into dishes marked as allergen-free, Agent Chen reported. If they had succeeded, guests with severe allergies could have been hospitalized or killed. These people don't care who gets hurt as long as they achieve their goals. The day before the gala, Charlotte's mother called to request a private meeting. She was deeply troubled by rumors about criminal threats related to the estate and wanted to understand how her daughter's crimes had escalated to involve organized crime. I knew Charlotte had gambling problems, but I never imagined she had borrowed money from criminals, she said tearfully. Is there anything I can do to help ensure the safety of your event? I feel responsible for not recognizing how serious her problems had become. I assured her that law enforcement had the situation under control, but her genuine concern gave me an idea. Would you be willing to attend the gala as a legitimate guest? Your presence might help us identify Charlotte's associates if they try to blend in with the corporate crowd. She agreed immediately. If it helps protect innocent people from the consequences of my daughter's mistakes, I'll do whatever you need. On the morning of the gala, I arrived at the estate at 6 a.m. to begin final preparations. The FBI had installed sophisticated surveillance equipment throughout the venue, and Agent Chen's team was already positioned to monitor all access points. The Henderson Industries event planning team arrived at 8 to oversee setup for their corporate dinner. They were impressed by the estate's restored elegance and had no idea about the security operations surrounding their event. This venue is absolutely stunning, commented Jennifer Walsh, Henderson Industries executive assistant who was coordinating the dinner. Our CEO will be thrilled with how everything looks. This is exactly the kind of sophisticated atmosphere he wanted for our annual celebration. As catering staff began arriving, I changed into my server uniform and joined the team preparing for the evening service. The other servers welcomed me naturally, having been told I was a new hire interested in learning the hospitality business. Table assignments are posted in the kitchen, explained Carlos Mendez, the head server who was briefing the evening staff. We're expecting 200 guests tonight, including several local politicians and business leaders. This is a high-profile event that could lead to many more bookings if we provide exceptional service. The afternoon passed smoothly as we completed final preparations for the dinner service. Agents posing as vendors and security guards reported no suspicious activity, but everyone remained vigilant for signs of Charlotte's associates. At 4 p.m, Agent Chen received intelligence that changed everything about our security planning. Destiny, Charlotte has escaped during prisoner transport to a medical appointment, Agent Chen announced urgently. She overpowered a guard and fled in a stolen vehicle. We have to assume she's heading here to disrupt the gala personally. The news sent shockwaves through our security team. Charlotte's escape meant the threat level had escalated dramatically. She knew the estate's layout intimately and might attempt more dangerous sabotage than her criminal associates had planned. We're increasing agent presence throughout the venue, Agent Chen decided. Charlotte is likely to be desperate and unpredictable. Her gambling debts make her vulnerable to manipulation by the criminals she owes money to, and she probably blames you personally for her imprisonment. As evening approached and guests began arriving for the Henderson Industries Gala, I took my position serving dinner in the main ballroom. The atmosphere was elegant and celebratory, with corporate executives and their families enjoying cocktails and networking conversations. But beneath the surface, law enforcement agents remained alert for signs of Charlotte or her criminal associates. The evening that was supposed to celebrate the estate's restoration under new ownership had become a complex security operation with potentially deadly consequences. At 7:30, as I was serving appetizers to table 4, I noticed a woman in an expensive business suit who seemed oddly familiar. She was deep in conversation with several Henderson Industries executives. but something about her posture and gestures triggered my memory. When she turned toward me, my heart stopped. Despite wearing a sophisticated disguise and professional makeup, I recognized Charlotte immediately. She had somehow obtained credentials that allowed her to enter the gala as a corporate executive, positioning herself for the ultimate confrontation with me during her husband's company event. The moment she realized I had recognized her, Charlotte's facade of corporate sophistication disappeared completely. Her face contorted with rage as she stood up from table 4 and pointed directly at me. "Table 4 is dirty, bus girl!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. The entire ballroom fell silent as Charlotte's voice echoed through the elegant space. 200 corporate executives turned to stare at the spectacle unfolding before them. Crystal glasses paused halfway to lips, and conversations died mid-sentence as Charlotte's fury exploded across the dinner party. Her designer disguise couldn't hide the desperation in her eyes as she towered over me, pointing at the pristine table I had just finished setting. "That table is absolutely filthy. Clean it immediately. Don't you know how to do your job properly?" The humiliation she intended was palpable. Every person in the room could see her attempting to degrade me in front of Hartford's business elite. Whispers began circulating as guests recognized the inappropriate behavior but weren't sure how to respond. I took a deep breath, set down my serving tray, and reached into my apron pocket. The legal documents I had prepared for this exact moment felt solid and reassuring in my hands as I pulled them out and placed them calmly on the table Charlotte had declared dirty. "Actually, Charlotte," I said in a clear, steady voice that carried across the silent ballroom, "you need to leave. This is an eviction notice. I own this venue now, and I reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. Please gather your belongings and exit the premises immediately." Charlotte's face drained of all color as the reality of her situation crashed over her. "What? You can't own this place. This is my family's estate. You're just some nobody trying to steal what belongs to us." I gestured toward the large screens positioned around the ballroom that were typically used for corporate presentations. Agent Chen had prepared for this moment, and video evidence of Charlotte's crimes began playing for the entire gathering to see. Bank records showing her theft from the estate accounts appeared on screen, followed by security footage of her attempting to burn down the building. Audio recordings of her lies to victim families played through the sound system, revealing the scope of her deception and cruelty. "Ladies and gentlemen," I addressed the stunned crowd, "I'm Destiny Williams, the new owner of Grandview Estate. 6 months ago, this woman systematically embezzled over $300,000 from her elderly grandfather and 8 innocent families who trusted her with their most important celebrations." The corporate executives watched in fascination and horror as Charlotte's crimes were laid bare before them. Her desperate attempts to maintain her disguise crumbled as FBI agents began moving through the crowd toward her location. She was recently convicted of elder financial abuse, embezzlement, fraud, forgery, and attempted arson. I continued. "She escaped from prison custody this afternoon and somehow gained access to your corporate event. I apologize that her presence has disrupted your evening, but I want to assure you that she will be removed immediately." Charlotte spun around wildly, realizing she was surrounded by law enforcement agents disguised as guests and service staff. Her criminal associates who had planned to disrupt the event were also being arrested simultaneously throughout the venue. "This is all lies!" Charlotte screamed desperately. "She's the criminal! She stole my family's business! She forged documents and bribed officials to frame me for crimes I didn't commit." But her protests rang hollow as the evidence continued displaying on the screens around the room. Guest after guest could see the bank records, hear the audio recordings, and watch the security footage that proved Charlotte's guilt beyond any doubt. Agent Chen stepped forward with handcuffs as Charlotte made a final desperate attempt to flee toward the kitchen service entrance. Charlotte Henderson, you're under arrest for escaping federal custody, criminal trespassing, and violation of your restraining order prohibiting contact with estate property. The arrest was swift and professional, but Charlotte's final outburst echoed through the ballroom as agents escorted her away. You haven't won anything. This place will never be profitable. Everyone will know what you did to steal it from my family. As the ballroom doors closed behind Charlotte and her criminal associates, a remarkable transformation occurred among the corporate guests. Instead of awkward embarrassment, the atmosphere filled with genuine admiration for how the situation had been handled. Henderson Industries CEO Michael Henderson stepped forward to address the gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've just witnessed an extraordinary demonstration of integrity and courage under pressure. Ms. Williams, would you mind sharing more about how you exposed these crimes and saved this historic venue? The next hour became an impromptu presentation about the investigation that had led to Charlotte's conviction and the estate's restoration. Thomas arrived to provide his perspective as Charlotte's grandfather and victim, bringing many guests to tears with his story of betrayal and recovery. Destiny didn't just buy this property, Thomas explained to the fascinated crowd. She saved it from destruction and created a model for ethical business practices that protects families from the kind of exploitation my granddaughter perpetrated. She turned my worst nightmare into a source of hope for other potential victims. The victim families also arrived to share their experiences and thank me publicly for ensuring their restitution. Mrs. Martinez brought her daughter Sophia, who had finally been able to celebrate her quinceañera at the estate the month before. Ms. Williams made sure our daughter got the celebration that was stolen from her, Mrs. Martinez told the corporate gathering. But more importantly, she showed us that good people still exist who will fight for justice when innocent families are hurt. The Peterson couple shared photos from their beautiful estate wedding that had taken place 2 weeks earlier, finally achieving the elegant celebration Charlotte had stolen from them originally. The Johnson family presented a photo album from their successful 40th anniversary party, which had exceeded their dreams after being recreated at the restored estate. Charlotte's crimes brought tremendous pain to our families, Mr. Johnson said, but Destiny's response created something beautiful from that pain. She proved that integrity and compassion can overcome greed and selfishness. As the evening concluded, Henderson Industries CEO Michael Henderson announced that his company would be signing an exclusive 5-year contract with the estate for all their corporate events. We want to support a business that demonstrates such clear commitment to ethical practices and community service. 6 other corporate executives approached me before leaving to discuss hosting their own events at the estate. The publicity from Charlotte's dramatic arrest and the revelation of my investigation had created more business interest than any advertising campaign could have achieved. 3 months later, the estate was fully booked through the following year with weddings, corporate events, and community celebrations. The Victim Restitution Fund had grown to over $500,000, allowing us to compensate additional families we discovered had been harmed by Charlotte's schemes. The Elder Abuse Prevention Foundation I established using estate profits had begun offering educational seminars throughout Connecticut, helping families recognize and prevent financial exploitation of vulnerable seniors. Thomas became the foundation's primary spokesperson, sharing his story to help other families avoid similar betrayal. Charlotte served her full 5-year prison sentence with good behavior. During her incarceration, she participated in addiction counseling and financial responsibility programs. She wrote letters to each victim family accepting full responsibility for her crimes and expressing genuine remorse for the pain she had caused. Upon her release, Charlotte contacted me requesting a meeting to apologize personally and ask about opportunities to contribute to the Elder Abuse Prevention Foundation. Her time in prison had provided the perspective she needed to understand the scope of harm her actions had caused. I spent 5 years thinking about every family I hurt and every lie I told, Charlotte said during our meeting. I can't undo the damage I caused, but I want to spend the rest of my life helping prevent other people from making the choices I made. Today, Charlotte works as a counselor for gambling addiction programs and speaks regularly at financial literacy seminars about the warning signs of embezzlement and fraud. Her children, who were innocent victims of her crimes, have rebuilt relationships with their great-grandfather Thomas and often visit him at the estate. The Grandview Estate continues to thrive as a premier venue for family celebrations and corporate events. Every wedding anniversary party and quinceañera held there represents our commitment to protecting the joy and trust that should define life's most important moments. Thomas, now 87, maintains an office at the estate where he greets couples planning their weddings and shares stories about the thousands of celebrations the venue has hosted over 7 decades. His presence reminds everyone that some legacies are worth preserving and protecting no matter what challenges emerge. The estate's success enabled us to expand the Elder Abuse Prevention Foundation nationwide, providing resources and support to families dealing with financial exploitation. We've helped recover over $2 million for elderly victims and prevented countless additional crimes through our educational programs. Looking back on that night when Charlotte screamed at me in front of 200 corporate executives, I realize it represented the moment when justice finally triumphed over greed, when community support overcame individual selfishness, and when preservation defeated destruction. My grandmother Margaret always taught me that wealth should be used to protect innocent people and preserve things that matter to communities. By purchasing the Grandview Estate and exposing Charlotte's crimes, I was able to honor her memory while creating something positive from what had started as a story of betrayal and theft. The most powerful lesson from this experience is that true strength doesn't come from seeking personal revenge against people who hurt us. Instead, it comes from building systems that protect other potential victims and creating positive change that lasts far beyond any individual conflict. When we choose to respond to cruelty with justice, to betrayal with integrity, and to destruction with preservation, we create ripple effects that benefit entire communities for generations to come. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between personal revenge and protecting others from harm? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how we can build stronger communities that support vulnerable people and preserve meaningful traditions. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to look for opportunities to transform pain into purpose in your own life. Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming adversity, and share this with anyone who might benefit from knowing that justice and integrity can triumph over greed and selfishness. May you always have the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult, and may you find ways to turn your own challenges into sources of strength for helping others.